save it into a file so you can then put it on some social media or in a website or in some, I don't know, a PowerPoint project or, you know, slideshow, whatever. You want to save this. So there's a couple of ways you can save this. First of all, if you're not done yet, if you want to get it back into Dogwaffle PD Howler at some point, make sure, do yourself a favor and save it from the animation menu. Right? You're going to want to save animations from the animation menu. Don't go to the file. That's really mostly for images, individuals. There's also a save for brushes, by the way, that will save the brush image. But here is the animation. So first of all, save it, and that will save it in a DWA file, Dogwaffle Animation. So let's do that. I'm going to go to the animation and save, and it's going to keep it in a folder it remembers if you already did save something, and it will see if there's any other DWA files, right? So this save option is for Dogwaffle native animation format. It's a very large file. Well, this one is not super large. It's only 9 megabytes, but it's big considering that it's such a short animation, right? It's not compressed. It's an uncompressed image dump. And each frame is there with a little header at the beginning, and that's it. So I'm going to go and save it in a similar way, but not overriding this one. I'm going to say this is 01.dwa. And that's it. All right, so we can always use that if we restart the program or lose this and need to get back to it. Let's go do that. In fact, let's say we deleted everything and we want to get back to that animation that we had stored. Let's in fact lose this one and really be completely unable to work from what we currently have, so we depend on that file. Let's go open it again, and there it is. Reopen that. Alright, so we have the animation back. First thing, if we keep working with it, we're going to say let's store this animation again, this time to disk, so we have a nice copy we can work with and restore. The next thing we want to do is to save it, publish it in a few other formats, right? Some of you old timers may remember the AVI file. There's also image sequence, and then there's a GIF animation, there's a media that will be a WMV, Windows Media, or MP4. So there's a couple of formats to save it at. Let's go through them one by one. Let's do first a save sequence, right? So we save it as an image sequence. And so what happens with that is that it's going to say, well, let's go to that same folder. I haven't saved any image sequence yet, but there's a couple of formats you can save it at. And I would go with the Targa, the default Targa, not this one. That's it. That's also a Targa format, but it goes through a different mechanism. I would go with the default Targa, or possibly PNG, if you want the PNG image sequence. JPEG okay, but it's lossy, so when you restore it, you might not see the exact same pixels. And then there's a couple of other formats, you know, try with them, save with a few formats at the same time. I'm going to go with the default Targa because it gives me some extra options. And what I'm going to say, well, this is 01 dot, not DWA, this is going to be frames, something like that, and it's going to add a .tga to that, right? So I'm going to say save, and boom. Actually, it didn't ask me for any extra information. Let's see what we have in that folder now. Oh, I just realized I did not actually record, so I just wanted to show here in the folder after saving the images we have an image sequence, but the preview doesn't know what to show. Windows Explorer doesn't know what the Targa file looks like, so it's not giving you a preview. And if you show maybe thumbnails, it's not going to show it. I'm using Earphone View as my default app here to view images, so we have the Earphone View logo here. Highly recommended as a companion. It's a great image program. And so what we want to do is perhaps save it also as another image sequence. So let's go animation, save sequence, and this time we'll save it as JPEG maybe, or PNG. You'll probably want to use PNG. Let's do them both. Let's do JPEG. So this is for 01 frames. Don't put the .jpeg there. It will add that, but it will add each of them will have a number on it, an increasing sequence of numbers, and then we also can indicate the quality. And just to show how the compression loses some stuff, I'm going to make it very low quality. Right, so this is going to be an image sequence that's converted to JPEG, and if we look at it now, we have images in a variety of formats. It's kind of good to see them together. So you could either search here by JPEG, star.jpg, so you know you have those in there, and you should see just the JPEG images. And there they are. So the preview should actually give you an idea of what that image looks like. It's still not too bad, but it does have some loss of details. Once you reload this, the compression will show. But it's usable. You can certainly use this and see that there is an animation. As you use the arrow key to go from one frame to the other, you can actually preview that. Fun stuff. Let's save it also as a PNG. Well, I'll let you do that. So there is another couple of formats to save. There is a save AVI. So that's a format that I like to use for a couple of reasons. But you may want to indicate how quickly it needs to play, right? When it's an AVI file, just like also when it's some other file, many times you need to indicate at what rate it's going to play back. Just because you save it doesn't mean you tell it. So you need to actually include that information, because here in the program we say how quickly we want to play it. There is an FPS here, frames per second, right? So if I gave it like 8 or 6 frames per second, or let's say 15, that's fine, and we can play it here at that rate. But when we save it, we need to make sure that it goes with that information. So save it as an AVI and indicate where you want it. And what I'm going to do is say, well, I put it right in here, and that will be 01.avi, right? Make sure you put the .avi on that. And then you're not saved yet. This is just saying the path. Last chance to check the number. Maybe I'm going to make it a little bit less. Let's say 10 frames per second. And here is the save AVI. Now at this point, you still need to give it some options for AVI, and you could keep it uncompressed or some of the old codecs. I like to use one that is not compressed but still fast and small file, and that's Lacquer. It's a lossless codec, it's free. Find it at, I forget the name. There's some information on that, look it up. Xvid, of course, if you have some sort of a compression codec that you like for that. But I'm going to use Lacquer, so it's lossless. Not every other app knows what that is, though, so be careful. Test it first before you start doing some real work with it. You want to make sure you can actually save it in the other applications. There's also some configuration options. I can perhaps show you what I use. I don't use null frames. I do suggest RGB for output. There's an RGB alpha, but we don't save the alpha in an animated mode, so that's not of any use for us. Here's a multi-threading. I would definitely use that. And then prevent upsampling. I have no idea why we would prevent it or what it does in one way or the other. So I'll just keep it like that and OK that. Boom, it now saved it. And after you saved it, you want to test it. Do a show. It's going to test it with your current default image viewer. That could be, in my case, that's a Windows Media Player. It could be something else. You want to make sure it's something that actually knows or remembers what an AVI file is. Not all players these days know how to play an AVI file. So, wait, can you hear me? My microphone was way far away. Okay, I'm going to have to check that audio. Anyway, so that's the AVI save. And I'm going to go a couple of more formats to save. So save AVI we did. You know what, let's just for fun also save it in a different. This one, actually I'm going to now say in here not just where I want to save it, but what file. We have an AVI. Luckily Windows still remembers what an AVI file is. It's kind of a native Windows format, or at least it used to be very popular there. And I think it stands for audio video something, right? Audio video interchange or interleave. There you go, interleave. But what we want to do is indicate here what codec. So I'm going to say this one is going to be with uncompressed. So we have also just an uncompressed I'm going to use. When I click save, I make sure I remember that full frame uncompressed and save that. And then so I'm going to do the same thing again, but explicitly indicate this time it's going to be Lacquer. And if I'm familiar with Lacquer, I'm just going to call it lag. Not that it has lag. In fact, the guy who created it, he goes by the artist name of Lags-a-lot, Sir Lags-a-lot. I love it. But yeah, it's Lacquer, so might as well. The lagging algorithm, I guess, or something like that. I'm going to keep it that way and save it and make sure I choose that format so it matches the description in the file name, right? There's no point in tricking yourself and forgetting what you really did. Make sure you choose Lacquer if you call it Lacquer. All right, so we have that. Now let's move on to a few other formats. There is also the export media. And with that, you have a choice of either the MP4 format or some of the WMV. I would go with the latest number if you want WMV. Let's save that. And then here you see it already has chosen. It still has the old name. We could take that away and just have get rid of Lacquer if in the file name and just have it 01 WMV. You might do yourself a favor and also indicate that's a WMV3. And then you have another parameter here. Okay, frames per second, of course, not surprising. It gives you the option to say how quickly or how slowly you want it played back when you actually view it in a Windows Media Player or something like that. But there is also a target bitrate, and that's important if you have a large image frame, like the width and the height of the frames is high. Then you really need more bitrate. You need more pixels packed into each frame for the flow of the image, the movie. So I usually just add something in front of that. I'm lazy with my left hand. I go 1, 2, so I have 12 million bits per second or whatever the unit is. Target bitrate. That way I know it's going to have super high definition even if it didn't need it. The file might be big, but you know what? At the end of the day, if you upload it to YouTube or somewhere else, they usually decompress it or recompress it and take it down into smaller, medium, and larger size anyway. So the biggest, highest size you can produce is probably okay. You'll wait a little bit for upload, but it's going to have the capacity to look good at any resolution actually viewed. So I use that and then I save it, right? And again, after saving it, don't forget to test it, because if anything went wrong, now is the time to fix it, right? You want to make sure it's actually fixable. If you do that later, you may not have access to that image anymore or to that movie. All right, so that was one. There's another format we can save to. That was MP4. Let's do that. So again, this time I'm changing this file name, and I'm going to call it MP4. MP4, and maybe we don't care about the bitrate, so we always use the same, but maybe we can actually have some scenarios where you need different bitrates to accommodate super large, super small size, and so in that case that's something that would be useful also to have in the file name itself. Anyway, save it and then view it to test it, and there it is. Alright, so we've saved to most of the common formats. There's always something else. We don't do everything here. We would be charging much more money if we did. We would have to, right? So here is export media. We've done that for MP4 and for and WMV. There is one more format that's often requested, and here it is. That's the exporting to a GIF animation, right? So the animated GIF file. We can see this going to a GIF. So let's see if we actually have that working. Yep, there it is. So an animated GIF will also want to know what's the delay. So this is not the frame rate, it's sort of the delay, how long to wait before playing the next. Turns out to be pretty much the same, right? So I'm going to go 10 frames a second, or actually I'm going to go a little bit more. I'm going to say it's in hundredths of a second. So if I tell it to delay it 33 hundredths of a second, so like 0.3, it's roughly a frame every 3 seconds. So it's going to play at about 3 frames per second. It's not exact since it has it's in hundredths of units. That's a limitation of animated GIF, but it's good enough. Let's make it an even 25. That means we do 24. We do 4 frames per second, right? 25 hundredths of a second. God, I don't like the English way of saying hundredth. Anyway, 25 hundredths of a second. There are 4 of those in a second, so we're going to do 4 frames per second approximately. And we need to give it a file name, so again we can go here and specify what to call it. This is going to be 01 anim gif .gif, call it what it is, and that's that. Let's save it, and then okay, it's being written. Oh, there's a look at that. Windows actually is telling me something, but let's see if it's if we can show it now. Yep, and I'm opening it in Irfan View, my trusted image viewer that also knows what an animated GIF is, not just a static image or static GIF, and it's playing at about 4 frames per second, right? If you want to count with me, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Yeah, we have 12 frames in here, and we're doing good. So that's it for saving your animations. You save them in native format, especially if you keep working on it. It's a good backup also. Just save it to DWA. Also, if the program ever were to crash and you have this stored image here, it's also in a DWA format. Right, so you can actually recover that. All you got to do is go to the folder where the temp folder is for Howler, and you'll find a couple of DWAs. Grab them before you restart Dogwaffle if you need a copy of them, because they may get cleared out. All right, that's it, and I think that's really it. Well, there's a lot of things to do with frames, I mean with animations, right? But this is just focusing on how to save them in the first place, right? If you want that really small, you can go to something like image resample. There you go, and let's say you want half the size. So let's divide by 2 and half the size of that. So now we have 128 squared. And so each frame gets resampled, and we now have a tiny little animation. And we can go to animation and call it save export to GIF animation again. This time we'll keep it also at the same rate. Let's say, so 25 milliseconds or hundredths of second, centiseconds, that's the word. And then here we say what file it is. There's already one here, but we're going to call it quarter size. I like to call it quarter size if it's half and then half again. And so it's a -QS, quarter size for me. And save it and show it. There you go. So we have a little animated GIF, and you can put that into a web page or just delete it. Right? It was fun. Thanks. See you next time.